Hey there, today I have an order summary video, and in this video I'm going to break down the comic books that I won at auction from Infinity Comics. This is the companion video to unboxing number 195. This was the Infinity auction wins where won a lot of Bronze Age DC horror, and wanted to just kind of review the books, what the final grades were, show you what my final bid was in order to win the books, and then also I think uh, something that I learned through this process when reviewing the final grades versus the advertised grades, particularly books of this age and era. I think that that was also interesting. Before I show you the spreadsheet and the breakdown, there was a couple of other things too. When I was building out my decision logic to help me determine which books I should send for pressing, which books I should put away in my personal collection or consider moving on from, I was actually overestimating the cost of clean and press for each book, and also the cost to submit to CGC. Now, what I will say is your mileage may vary. I am a CGC Elite member. I pay for that membership, and it's just math at this point. The amount of books that I've submitted to CGC over the last year, it just mathematically made sense to go ahead and pay for the additional tier of membership. With that, I think you get $150 credit, so that helps offset the membership. But really, what sold it for me was the boost from a 10% per graded book discount all the way up to 20%. And so that's where it made more sense for me to do that. And when I realized that I was paying for that membership plus that discount, I factored that into my equation to help me figure out what I'm truly spending with CGC. And I was actually overestimating the per book cost. And what I do is I take everything. I think of how much it costs to ship the books. Am I using any packing materials? I really try to get it almost down to the penny to really figure out how much am I really adding in terms of my investment per book when sending books off to CGC. And I was ballparking around $32 per book, and that was too much. And so I was thinking that this alteration of my formula would introduce maybe some updated decisions, but as you'll see here momentarily, that was not the case. So let's take a look at the spreadsheet specifically and go through the individual items that I won at auction. So these were the books that I won March 21st, 2024. You can see that the total invoice from HipComic was $282.82. These were all won from the seller Infinity Comics. And you can also see the grades here as everything kind of finished up at around a 7.28. In that fine, very fine, or VF minus range. Now, it's difficult to take an average because I typically take the average when I'm ordering near mint books, and then this kind of helps me understand, is this seller really selling near mint comics if the average grade is at, below, or above 9.4. I still like to see kind of an average, but it doesn't really make sense in this case just because the books are kind of scattered in terms of condition. I think what I would like to implement is maybe pull out the grade here. So like Ghost 32, for example, is very fine, and then see if the grade ultimately was below, at, or above the listed condition, and then maybe determine a percentage, like what is the percentage chance that when I get the book in my possession and I regrade the book, will it be as advertised or not? I think that that would be a bit more interesting than just taking a sum and average of these grades. But I could talk about some of the grades in particular, like a House of Mystery 218 that I gave a 5. It was listed as a fine, very fine. And then also House of Secrets number 90 got a 5.0. No surprise, particularly the House of Secrets 90, the Neil Adams cover, as that one is a bit more coveted, as any Neil Adams covers of this type of genre is going to probably be the most in demand. So it's not like I'm going to get an 8.5 from a random auction, at $13. But thought I would, go ahead and pay the $13.75, or essentially my final bid of $11.61 to win that book, even at a 5.0. It's kind of the compromise that I make, where if I am going to look at a book that's in higher demand, then I'll pay less for a lesser graded copy to go ahead and acquire it, to kind of set my floor as far as any books I'd be willing to buy in the future. And what I mean by that is simply, if I come across another House of Secrets number 90 at auction, and maybe Infinity has it as a VG, I'm going to stay away from it regardless of the final bid, because I've got my floor set at a 5.0. Now, I'm not going to go book by book. You can see the spreadsheet just as I can. I just want to go over the summaries for you, and then ultimately what I'm deciding to do with these books. You can see from a raw value perspective, this was a loss of $24.82 if I were to just buy all of these books at their graded condition, my graded condition, and if they were available somewhere, eBay, etc., based on the cover price, fair market value, I would stand to lose about $25. Also interesting, kind of not really a wash, because some of these books don't even have a CGC value, as you can see here, but only a $6 value add if I were to send the books that had CGC values in for grading. Now, one of the things, in all honesty, if I'm being realistic, is I'm not buying these books as is to send off for grading. I'm buying these because I feel like when I look at the scans, these books have pressable defects. And so I think all of these I marked as candidates for pressing, the majority of them needing a clean and press, as designated here in this column, where I mark CP, meaning it needs a clean and press. And I do that just in case I'm working with a third-party cleaner or presser where it's a different charge. The Comic Doctor has different tiers of cleaning and pressing services. Palm Beach has one price. And so I just do that, one, because the CP designation means that the book is going to need more work in order to get it where I need it to be. So it might cost more, or maybe because of the additional work, it's less likely to get the grade bump that a book that just needs like a quick press would need. It doesn't always kind of work out, but again, just kind of making sure that I really understand the kind of effort that's needed to try and improve the book. So with all of these meeting expectations in terms of the need to clean and press these books, I've indicated as such, and then I go ahead and break down my analysis as far as like, well, if they do get a grade bump, then what values are we looking at? And you can see a lot of zeros in here. And what this means is, take House of Mystery 221 and a VF minus. I graded that as 6.0. It was unfortunate. It fell below the advertised condition of a VF minus. And even if it were to get a bump to a 6.5, 7, and 7.5, there is still no value for that book. Now, this is the problem, is I thought it was going to be around a VF. So then if we're talking 8.0, now we start to get into the 8s and the 9s, and then a book like that does have value. So overall, even though I still trust my eye when I'm reviewing the scans, the books were in much worse shape in general than I thought they were. Another example, House of Secrets 110 listed as a VF minus. I graded it as a 7.0. House of Secrets 111, fine plus, should have been a 6.5, it was a 6, and so forth. And that was just kind of the general result and assessment of this order, is that I think I probably overreached. And when you're looking at the decision column here, it really kind of justifies that feeling of, overreaching, or particularly, I don't want to say overbidding. It's not really a situation where I paid too much. It was bidding on books at a specific grade where the value at that grade just falls off. It just drops off. And this is something that I have really tried to tune, but also it's hard to tune emotion, particularly if you're participating in an auction. And I remember looking at this auction and getting quite excited with the fact that they had titles like Ghost, House of Mystery, and House of Secrets. And I just kind of went on a tear as far as bidding went. And I probably needed to reel it in, because the books were not in as high grade as I thought, or as I had predicted. And that's the challenge that I give to myself, is to find the breaking point where a book is just not valuable if it is at or below a certain condition. You can also look at House of Mystery 230 as another example. Uh, VF minus, this one did grade out a little bit better in an 8.0, a straight, very fine. And even with it being a clean and press candidate, then it still ended up not being worthwhile, just because still there's not enough data in terms of these grades in an 8.5, a 9.92, and so on, where you can see, if I go all the way back to my final bid, $9.50 was the final bid. And I really thought, okay, 1975, House of Mystery, got it for under 10 bucks. I thought it was higher than a 7.5. It ended up being an 8.0, great. Fair market value, 21 bucks. So essentially half the fair market value. Thought I was getting a really good deal. And then as it turns out, it is not worthy of submitting for pressing. And how do I do that? If we go all the way to the right, some of these columns I don't even look at because I just sort of trust the process and the formula. You can see it would have been an additional investment where it would be negative, meaning if I were to send this book off for cleaning and pressing and then getting it graded by CGC and looking at the potential value add if it came back in a higher grade than 8.0, and I would still be losing about $44, and so I just don't bother. The value here in this column, it has to, in the press eval, it has to be positive in order for it to be eligible for me to send in for pressing. And so, and as you can see here, just to wrap up the summary, only two books really were worth submitting for pressing: Crisis on Infinite Earths #7 and Amazing Spider-Man 235. And if I go back here to show you what I paid for these, 235, $6.49 final bid. Not a lot of Amazing Spider-Man issues in this auction, so that's another thing I look out for, is when there's not this giant run in a title and maybe a couple of Marvel team-ups or a couple of Amazing Spider-Mans are in there, sometimes they don't get enough attention from bidders that some of the whales target. Whereas if it's a run of Amazing Spider-Man, you'll see those whales bid on like almost every book. So I was able to pick up that one for $6.49, and then the Crisis book listed in a VF. Oh, the Amazing Spider-Man 235 was a VF plus, and I graded as a 9.4. And then Crisis #7 listed as a VF. I also graded that one as a 9.4. And so the combination of what I paid the Crisis, my final bid was $20.01, and it's a penny over a full dollar amount because there are some bidders on Infinity where I understand how they bid. There's one individual that I often get outbid by, and what he likes to do is he likes to bid his dollar amount followed up with 99 cents. And so what I'll do is I'll either bid the whole amount or bid a penny over just in case, and I'm able to win that auction when I see that bidder as the high bidder. So that combination of getting the book for around 20 bucks and then its potential value increase, where you can see a 9.8 here is worth $111 for Crisis 7, which seems low to me, but I think it's just because while that book is great and it's a very, it's a classic cover, one of probably the most iconic covers from the Crisis miniseries, that book can be found very easily. So you're just kind of dealing with supply and demand at that point. But for the amount that I paid, the condition that it's in, and then the potential value, if the grade were to be improved, that's where the decision engine comes back and says, yep, let's send that one off for pressing. Same thing with ASM 235. It is $100 roughly in a 9.8. Picked it up for under 10 bucks. So you can kind of see the gap and the margin there. And part of it too is I build in, when I'm referring to margin, I'm also building in additional fees, penalties, percentages, and then maybe a possible or desirable profit or value add. And all of this is just a way of me saying that if I were to get this book graded and end up selling it on eBay, then what I do is I calculate the 15% seller's fees, additional fees, and then also I pad it out a little bit because I certainly don't want to lose any money through this process. So what would I like to make? And I usually set that very low, and then that's all part of the formula. So I don't want to submit a book where, let's say I bought it for 20, it's going to cost me 15 to press and clean it. So now I'm at 35, and then it's going to cost me roughly 30 to grade it, 65. I don't want to then say, oh, that's a $75 book that I could sell, because if you take a $75 book and then sell it on eBay and you get hit with all of the fees, you end up losing money, even though you think you're selling it at a profit. You're really not. If you're thinking, well, I paid 65 or I've invested 65 and then I'm going to sell it for 75, isn't that a profit? It's not. There's always going to be some sort of selling cost, whether it's packing supplies or something. If you're doing a live claim sale, I understand that, but if you're using live claim software, there's fees and penalties there as well. So I try to bake all of that in. So that's where, if you look at the decision, the outcome for each of these books, and it's blank, and these are all just going to end up going in my personal collection as is. I don't want to really move on from any of these books because these are my initial copies of the House of Secrets, House of Mystery, and Ghosts. And like I said, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to buy in at a floor and then say, okay, now that I have this copy, how do I look at improving and trading up and moving up to get a higher grade copy? Let me know what you think about how this set of auction wins turned out. I have definitely noticed that the bidding on HipComic, particularly when Infinity Comics runs auctions, it continues to be very stressful, very competitive. And so if you do bid on the platform, I would love to get your feedback, just kind of the state of things. I do kind of take breaks from time to time just because it is a little disheartening to prepare as much as I do just to get outbid and sniped at the very end. I participated in a couple auctions recently where I had done this and I got outbid on everything. And so I just sometimes just stay away, and it's kind of good for the heart and good for the wallet to take a break. But this was a fun breakdown. I think some lessons learned. Would love to get your feedback on it. Thanks for watching. Happy collecting, and see you next time.